The mistake happened in less than 5 seconds. Jacob never meant to sit there. He had grease under his fingernails and a faded work shirt that still smelled like engine oil. The invitation in his hand wasn't even his, it belonged to the luxury car owner whose Bentley he had fixed that morning. The man insisted Jacob attend the royal charity banquet in his place. Just show up, the man had laughed. It's boring anyway. Jacob didn't know the event was being hosted by the emperor himself. The ballroom inside the palace glittered like something out of another world. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above marble floors. Waiters moved like clockwork. Everyone wore custom suits, silk gowns, diamonds that could pay off a city block. Jacob felt like a stain in the room. He checked the small golden card again. Table 7. He found it near the center, too close to the stage. He hesitated. But every seat had a name card. One seat was empty. So he sat. The conversations around him slowly died. Forks paused mid-air. Somebody whispered. Jacob felt it before he saw it, a shift in the air. Attention. Across from him sat a young woman in a pale ivory dress. Perfect posture. Motionless. Her eyes were open, but distant. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Then Jacob noticed the subtle detail, the faint brace under her dress sleeve. The stillness wasn't elegance. It was paralysis. And behind her, standing like a shadow, was the emperor. The most powerful man in the country. Watching him. Jacob's stomach dropped. He hadn't just sat at the wrong table. He had taken the only empty seat beside the emperor's silent, paralyzed daughter. And the entire room was waiting to see what would happen next. No one told him to leave. That was the terrifying part. The emperor didn't speak. He just watched. Jacob felt every pair of eyes in the ballroom burning into him. Wealthy businessmen. Politicians. Media executives. People who could destroy a man's life with a single phone call. He should stand up. He knew he should. But something stopped him. It wasn't pride. It wasn't rebellion. It was her. Up close, she didn't look fragile. She looked trapped. Her eyes were alive, intensely aware, but her body refused to follow. There was frustration in them. Loneliness. A storm with no voice. A server leaned toward Jacob and whispered sharply. "Sir, this table is reserved." Before Jacob could respond, the emperor's deep voice cut through the room. "He's sitting." The whispering stopped. The server froze. Jacob swallowed. The emperor stepped forward, resting a hand gently on his daughter's wheelchair. "My daughter, Elena," he said evenly. "She hasn't spoken in 3 years." The room stiffened at the raw honesty. Jacob looked at her again. Elena. Not a statue. Not a symbol. A person. "I'm Jacob," he said softly, not to the emperor. To her. No one ever introduced themselves to her directly. They spoke about her. Around her. Never to her. Elena's eyes shifted. Just slightly. It was small. So small most people wouldn't notice. But Jacob did. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I fix engines," he said quietly. "They don't talk either. But they always tell you what's wrong, if you listen long enough." A faint tremor moved in her fingers. The emperor's jaw tightened. Doctors had tried. Therapists had tried. The best specialists in the world. Nothing. And yet, this grease-stained mechanic was speaking to her like she wasn't broken. For the first time in years. Elena blinked twice. Slowly. Intentionally. And the emperor noticed. The entire future of that night just changed. The blink wasn't random. The Emperor knew it. He had memorized every involuntary movement his daughter made over the past 3 years. Every reflex. Every muscle twitch. Every false hope. This wasn't one of them. Elena's eyes stayed locked on Jacob. Not drifting. Not distant. Focused. The ballroom felt smaller now. Heavy. Like the air itself was waiting. Jacob didn't know what he had done. He only knew one thing: she was listening. So he kept talking. "I used to rebuild old Mustangs," he said softly, ignoring the hundreds of eyes watching him. "Sometimes the damage isn't obvious. Engine looks perfect from the outside. But inside, something tiny stops everything from moving." He paused. "You don't replace the whole engine. You find the stuck part." A silence followed that felt different from before. Not empty. Charged. Elena's fingers trembled again. This time stronger. Her right index finger twitched, once, twice. And then slowly, painfully, it moved half an inch toward the edge of the table. Gasps rippled across the room. The Emperor stepped forward instantly, then stopped himself. He didn't want to scare the moment away. Jacob didn't look shocked. He looked calm. Like a mechanic watching a stubborn engine finally respond. "You're still in there," he whispered to her. "Aren't you?" A tear formed in Elena's eye. Not from pain. From effort. Her breathing changed, shallow, then deeper. The Emperor's hands began to shake. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of doctors explaining permanent neurological damage. And now. Her lips parted. The room leaned forward as one. No sound came out. But her throat moved. She was trying. And for the first time in 3 years. The Emperor wasn't looking at Jacob with suspicion. He was looking at him with hope. Elena's lips trembled again. No sound. But effort. Real effort. The Emperor moved closer now, slowly, like approaching a fragile flame. "Easy," he whispered, not to her, but to the moment. Jacob stayed still. He didn't touch her. Didn't panic. Didn't celebrate. He just stayed present. "Don't rush it," he said gently. "Engines stall when you force them." A soft murmur moved through the guests. Some were filming now. Some were crying. Others looked confused, uncomfortable, like they were witnessing something too personal for a ballroom. Then it happened. A sound. Not a word. A broken breath shaped into something fragile. "Ah!" The Emperor froze. Elena's chest rose sharply. Her fingers gripped the tablecloth, knuckles turning pale. And then suddenly, her wheelchair jerked. Her body stiffened. A sharp metallic sound echoed as one of the chair's locks snapped. Guests gasped. The Emperor lunged forward to stabilize her, but Jacob was faster. He didn't grab her. He grabbed the chair. His mechanic's eyes had already spotted it. The brake mechanism on the right wheel wasn't aligned properly. Slightly bent inward. Not medical failure. Mechanical failure. Jacob crouched instantly, ignoring the fact that he was kneeling in front of royalty. "Whose service is this chair?" he asked sharply. No one answered. The Emperor's voice came cold and dangerous. "It's inspected weekly." "Not by someone who understands pressure torque," Jacob replied calmly. He pressed the wheel gently. It wobbled. "When resistance increases," he said quietly, looking up at the Emperor, "her body compensates. That strain could be triggering the muscle lock." The ballroom went silent again. This wasn't a miracle. This was physics. Jacob adjusted the bent lever slightly with his bare hands, slow, precise. Then he stood. "Try again," he whispered to Elena. Her breathing steadied. The tension in her shoulders eased. And then, her lips parted once more. This time, clearer. SSS. The Emperor leaned so close he could hear her breath. Dad. The word shattered the room. The most powerful man in the country dropped to his knees beside his daughter, not as an emperor, but as a father. And for the first time in 3 years. Elena spoke, the word still echoed in the ballroom. Dad. Not loud. Not strong. But undeniable. The Emperor didn't try to hide it. His shoulders shook as he pressed his forehead gently against Elena's hand. For 3 years, he had been the strongest man in every room. Tonight, he was just a father who almost lost his daughter. Guests stood frozen. Some wiped tears. Others stared at Jacob like he was something they didn't understand. A mechanic. In a room built for kings. Elena's breathing was steadier now. Her fingers flexed again, this time with more control. Not perfect. Not healed. But fighting. Jacob stepped back, giving them space. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't proud. He just looked relieved. The Emperor stood slowly. When he turned toward Jacob, the room held its breath. Power filled the space around him again, but it felt different now. Walk with me, he said. Not a command. A request. They moved toward a quieter corner of the ballroom while Elena remained surrounded by medical staff, not in panic, but cautious observation. The Emperor studied Jacob closely. You weren't intimidated, he said. Jacob shrugged lightly. Engines don't care about titles. A faint, unexpected smile touched the Emperor's face. You believe her condition was worsened by mechanical stress? I believe, Jacob replied carefully, that sometimes we try to solve human problems with the wrong kind of expertise. Silence. Then the Emperor said something no one in that palace expected. Stay. Jacob frowned slightly. Stay. I want you here tomorrow. And the day after that. Not as a guest. His voice lowered. As someone I trust near my daughter. That sentence alone shifted Jacob's entire life. He had walked into the palace by accident. Now the most powerful man in the country was offering him a place inside it. But Jacob's jaw tightened. He glanced back at Elena. She wasn't looking at the doctors. She was looking at him. And in her eyes wasn't gratitude. It was fear. Like she knew something no one else did. Like tonight's breakthrough was only the beginning. Jacob didn't leave that night. Even after the ballroom emptied. Even after the press was escorted out. Even after the Emperor ordered absolute privacy. He stayed. Elena was moved to a private sitting room instead of the medical wing. That alone told Jacob something had shifted. The Emperor didn't want this treated like a crisis. He wanted it treated like hope. Doctors ran quiet tests in the background. Monitors blinked softly. No alarms. No panic. Elena looked exhausted, but awake. Aware. Jacob stood near the window, unsure where he belonged now. Everyone out, the Emperor ordered gently. The room cleared. Only 3 remained. Father. Daughter. Mechanic. The Emperor crouched beside Elena again. Say it again, he whispered. Please. Her throat moved. She tried. But this time it wasn't Dad. It was something else. Her eyes moved to Jacob. Urgent. Her fingers twitched, trying to lift. Jacob stepped closer. Don't push too hard, he said softly. Take your time. Her lips shaped a different sound. N. She struggled. The Emperor leaned forward. Nurse, he guessed. Elena's eyes widened sharply. No. She forced her jaw again. N-O. Jacob felt it in his gut. That wasn't random. That was warning. Her breathing quickened. Her fingers gripped his sleeve weakly, surprising both men. Then it came out, broken but clear. Not accident. The room froze. The Emperor's face drained of color. The official story had always been simple. A car crash. Rain. Brake failure. 3 years ago. But Elena's eyes were wide now, desperate. She wasn't confused. She was remembering. Jacob felt the shift instantly. The bent brake mechanism on her wheelchair earlier. The subtle misalignment. The pattern. He looked at the Emperor carefully. Who serviced her car the night of the crash? Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. The Emperor stood slowly. And for the first time that night, the most powerful man in the country didn't look emotional. He looked furious. Because if it wasn't an accident, then someone had tried to silence his daughter. And they almost succeeded. The palace was silent by midnight. Not peaceful. Controlled. The Emperor had already made one quiet phone call. No shouting. No threats. Just instructions. Reopen the investigation. 3 years ago, the crash report had been sealed within 48 hours. Officially, brake failure during heavy rain. No foul play. But now the details felt different. Elena sat upright in her chair, exhausted but alert. The tremor in her fingers had lessened after Jacob adjusted the brake tension earlier. It wasn't a miracle cure. It was clarity. Someone had missed things. Or ignored them. Jacob stood across the room, unsure whether he had just stepped into history, or into danger. You noticed the torque imbalance in seconds, the Emperor said quietly, studying him. 3 separate engineers signed off on that wheelchair this year. Jacob didn't look impressed. Machines don't lie, he replied. People do. Elena's eyes filled again, not with fear this time. With relief, the Emperor approached her slowly. The car, he asked gently. Was it the same? She closed her eyes, then nodded. Small. But certain. The Emperor inhaled sharply. Brake manipulation isn't dramatic. It's subtle. A fraction of misalignment. Enough pressure at the wrong moment. Enough to create an accident. 3 years of silence hadn't been damage alone. It had been trauma. Jacob finally spoke again. She wasn't trying to remember, he said softly. She was trying to feel safe. The Emperor looked at him differently now. Not as a mechanic. Not as a guest. But as the only person in years who had listened instead of diagnosed. By dawn, security footage from the original crash site was being retrieved. Financial records were being reopened. Names were being revisited. Quietly. Powerfully. No public scandal. Not yet. The Emperor turned to Jacob. You sat at the wrong table tonight. Jacob gave a small smile. Seems like it. The Emperor shook his head slowly. No. He looked at his daughter, who was watching Jacob with steady, conscious eyes. You sat exactly where you were meant to. Jacob had walked in with grease on his hands and doubt in his chest. He walked out at sunrise with something far heavier. Trust. And somewhere behind palace walls, for the first time in 3 years, Elena slept without fear. Because the silence that almost erased her was finally broken.